Welcome to The Explainer. Let's jump right in. Today, we are unpacking the sprawling, totally wild web of claims, facts, and mind-bending theories surrounding America's most secretive base. Groom Lake, right? Area 51. For decades, it's been the absolute epicenter of conspiracy, innovation, and intense speculation. We're going to systematically peel back the layers of this mystery, looking at the accounts of scientists, military pilots, and insiders. Now, our goal here isn't to tell you what to believe, but to map out exactly what is being claimed and by whom, so you can see the full, incredible picture. To set the stage, I want you to think about this staggering question. How on earth did human technology leap further in the last 70 years than in the previous 5,000? I mean, what's the secret sauce that suddenly let us figure out things we literally couldn't grasp for millennia? Well, some theorists and whistleblowers argue it's not just human genius at work. They suggest it is the direct result of getting our hands on technology that simply did not originate on this planet. Keep that in your back pocket as we begin to unpack the timeline.
Okay, Section 1, the surface, declassification, and skunkworks. Let's get into it. Let's start with what we actually know for sure. Back in August 2013, after decades of firm denials, the CIA finally declassified documents officially acknowledging the existence of Area 51. The official government line? It's simply a testing ground for highly advanced experimental aircraft. Stuff like the U-2 spy plane, which flew at an insane 80,000 feet, and the F-117 stealth fighter. But then there's the rumored purpose, the massive elephant in the room that the government completely ignores. The claim that they hired top-tier propulsion experts, engineers and physicists, to secretly reverse engineer extraterrestrial tech that was basically light years ahead of our own.
To really get why those rumors took off, you've got to look at this incredibly tight timeline. In 1943, Lockheed engineer Clarence Kelly Johnson founded the Skunk Works division, kickstarting the jet age for the U.S. military. Fast forward exactly a decade to May 19, 1953. A nuclear test goes off at Yucca Flat, Nevada. Just 2 days later, 40 engineers are supposedly thrown onto a bus with blacked-out windows and driven to Kingman, Arizona. Why? To investigate a perfectly intact 40-foot flying disc and 4 beings. Now here's the kicker. On December 16th of that exact same year, Kelly Johnson himself records seeing a UFO he couldn't explain. And rather than being laughed out of the room for a crazy claim, he's rewarded. 2 years later, he is the very guy who selects Groom Lake to be the site for Area 51. Did he pick it just for testing jets, or to study exactly what he saw in the sky? Moving on to Section 2, the technology, reverse engineering the unknown. So if the whispers are true, what exactly were they tinkering with out there in the desert? Well, in 2014, literally just weeks before he passed away, Boyd Bushman, a senior Lockheed Martin scientist with 27 patents to his name, recorded a jaw-dropping deathbed confession. He flat-out claimed that folks with the highest clearances at Area 51 would hand him pieces of UFOs to study right in his lab. Bushman said these crafts contained elements like palladium and germanium, and that they, quote, pick up and fly using anti-gravity. He even went so far as to say there were at least 18 extraterrestrials standing about 4.5 feet tall, just working side by side with human scientists out there. Wild, right?
But here's the thing. How do you manage a daily workforce dealing with anti-gravity and alien entities? You look at the boring, mundane logistics. U.S. Air Force Captain David Freehoff, an elite SR-71 pilot who worked at Area 51 in the early 80s, noted the extreme security. You needed a top-secret special background investigation clearance just to step foot there. Personnel commuted from Vegas on Janet Airlines 737s with blacked-out windows. Freehoff noticed that upon landing, a very specific group of scientists would board a bus heading to a separate, highly secretive facility known as Site 4, or S4. Because, hey, even if you're reverse engineering alien hardware, you still gotta catch the morning commuter bus. Years later, when controversial whistleblower Bob Lazar claimed he worked at S4, Freehoff realized Lazar's exact description of those Janet flights and the bus transfer was spot on and totally believable.
All right, Section 3, the underground, hiding in plain sight. So if this massive operation has been expanding since the 50s, where is everybody? If you check out satellite imagery of Area 51, researchers argue you're basically just looking at vintage surface buildings from the Cold War era. The real work, it's supposedly moved deep underground to dodge prying eyes and Soviet satellites. But digging out huge underground complexes creates actual mountains of dirt. How do you hide that? Well, local Nevada miners point to a very real process called heap leaching. Over at nearby spots like the Tempiat mine, massive piles of ore are laced with hoses pumping chemicals like cyanide to literally dissolve huge boulders into nothing. Miners claim the government uses these local mines as a cover to dispose of the dirt excavated from Area 51, essentially paying them hush money to chemically erase the physical evidence.
And the scale of this underground expansion is reportedly staggering. Some researchers think Area 51 isn't even a standalone facility. It's just one terminal in a vast web of underground bases. The theory maps out a secret, high-speed subterranean train system. It supposedly kicks off at the hollowed-out Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado, connects down to Dulce, New Mexico, which has its own wild rumors of an alien base, then shoots over to Los Alamos, Albuquerque, down to Roswell before finally terminating at Area 51. The sheer logistical magnitude of a project like that is honestly breathtaking.
Next up, Section 4, the entities, extraterrestrial ambassadors.
We've talked hardware and secret tunnels, but what about the actual beings supposedly inside them? Let's jump to 1957. This year gives us one of the most detailed and frankly surreal accounts of a presidential close encounter. The story goes that a UFO landed in Virginia, right outside D.C., and out walks a human-looking guy who calls himself Valiant Thor. Now, instead of a massive military standoff, the police supposedly just give this guy a casual escort straight to the Pentagon, where he gets a meeting with President Eisenhower. The claim is that Valiant Thor wasn't a prisoner, he was an ambassador. He was apparently super concerned about humanity's use of nuclear weapons and was casually advising the US government on policy, exactly like a foreign envoy.
But arguably, the most famous entity tied to Area 51 is known as J-Rod. Remember that 1953 Kingman crash we talked about earlier? Well, whistleblowers say J-Rod was a survivor pulled from that wreckage. A guy named Captain Bill Use, who did experimental testing for the Air Force, claimed he had direct, face-to-face contact with J-Rod in the mid-1960s. He said J-Rod was brilliant, providing highly advanced scientific advice to help the military duplicate the futuristic power systems of the Kingman craft. Oh, and the strangest detail? Use said J-Rod's voice sounded kind of like a parrot. It's one of those bizarre, hyper-specific little details that makes the story all the more fascinating. So we've got stories of alien ambassadors and parrot-voiced engineers helping us leapfrog into the future. But hold on, because here is where we hit a massive narrative pivot. I want you to consider this for a second. What if the entities at Area 51 aren't aliens at all? Which brings us to Section 5, the twist. Humans from the future. So shortly after Captain Hughes broke his story about J-Rod, a microbiologist named Dan Barish came forward. He claimed he was specifically hired to care for J-Rod's health down in his specialized underground chamber. And Barish dropped a genuine bombshell. He said J-Rod communicated that he was not an extraterrestrial. He was actually an insectoid human from our own future. According to this account, a future global catastrophe destroys much of the planet, forcing humanity to split. One group survives deep underground, and over time, evolutionary pressures cause them to develop insect-like traits. What's crazy and honestly awe-inspiring is how perfectly this sci-fi claim aligns with ancient Hopi and Navajo legends. They literally have stories of the surface world becoming unlivable, and humanity surviving by going underground to live with what they called the ant people. Now, I know what you're thinking. Does it even make scientific sense that humans could evolve bug traits? Surprisingly, biology does offer a theoretical framework for this. Enter transposons, or jumping genes. Basically, these are genes that can copy and paste themselves from one species straight into the genome of another. Work on the human genome indicates that up to half of our DNA might be the result of transposons. Look at the Rhodius insect, which spreads Chagas disease. It's been shown to actually transfer its own genes into the stuff it bites. Since humans catch diseases from these insects, scientists suggest it is highly probable we already carry ancient insect DNA deep in our systems, just waiting in our genetic code from when our ancestors were bitten in the darkness thousands of years ago. Which leaves us staring at a seriously profound paradox. If the crafts recovered at Kingman and Groom Lake are actually time machines, and the entities inside are just our distant descendants trying to guide us through a bottleneck or warn us of a coming cataclysm, then whose technology is it really? Have we spent the last 70 years attributing our massive technological leaps to visitors from the stars, when in fact the answer is actually staring back at us from the mirror? Are we simply reverse engineering our own future? It is a total mindbender that completely reframes the ultimate mystery of Area 51. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember, always keep questioning what lies beneath the surface.